Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 31 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. And today we've got quite an interesting assortment of creatures today. So we're going to get started off with something done by Dinosaur, who I believe was a modder from the original Jurassic World Evolution. We've got a really cool dinosaur here, Titanosceratops. So we've got this really wonderful guy here. This is Titanosceratops. Though Titanosceratops, which means titanic horned face, is a controversial genus, but it is considered a ceratopsian. So it's related to animals such as Posterus and Triceratops, things like that. Giant chasmosaurine from the late Cretaceous, a Campanian stage, so about 75 million years ago from New Mexico. And it's got its name Titanosceratops from its large size, and is one of the largest known horned dinosaurs, and the type species was named Titanosceratops oronensis after Uranus, who was the father of the Greek Titans. And it was named in 2011 by Nicholas Longrich, which a specimen that was previously referred to Poposaurus. And Longrich believed that there were enough features to distinguish it as a close relative of Triceratops, classed within the subgroup of Triceratopsinae. However, other researchers don't really believe this, and they also think that Titanosceratops may just be a unusually large or old specimen of Poposaurus. So, this guy is known from quite a large skull, mainly, and the skull measures about 1.2 meters or 3.9 feet to the tip of the snout to the quadrate, and the frill is restored as about 2.65 meters, or about 8.7 feet, which actually makes it a candidate for one of the largest or longest dinosaur skulls of any land animal. And Titanosceratops, was as large as the later Triceratopsians like Triceratops and Torosaurus, with an estimated weight of about 6.5 tons, or about 7 short tons, and a mounted skeleton that measured about 6.8 meters, or 22.3 feet long, and 2.5 meters, or 8 feet tall at the back. Though there have been some lower estimates, they've been kind of really considered very similar to things like Triceratops and Josephsceratops, which they may actually be the same as well. The holotype contains a partial skull with jaws, lots of vertebrae, ribs, humeri, radius, tibia, fibia, and all those. And in total, the amount of material assigned to Titanosceratops is quite well known, along with genera such as Triceratops, Posterus, Chasmosaurus, animals like that. So the first holotype was found in the Fruitland Formation in the Lower Kirkland Formation in July 1941 by a field crew, and then the specimen was then prepared and described in 1988 and was found to be quite a usually large specimen of Poposaurus sternbergi, which was previously described and lived in the same area. And though in 2011 Nicholas Longrich kind of described it as Titanosceratops, and that has kind of been really interesting to talk about. And they reinterpreted this guy as kind of as an original species, or kind of earlier relative of animals such as Triceratops. So previously the origins of Triceratops were poorly known, but Longrich kind of reinterpreted Titanosceratops as a relative of Triceratops that became Triceratops. And Triceratops is the oldest known Triceratopsinae, so they're relative to Triceratops, and dated back to 68 million years ago. So this basically puts the origins of kind of Triceratopsinae a little bit older with Titanosceratops, though that is a hypothesis that is highly contested within the scientific community. So it was, I mentioned, pretty large fossil, as we mentioned, and it's known from the lowest Kirkland Formation, or the uppermost Kirkland Formation, Fruitland Formation, and uppermost Kirkland Formation, which has lots of sandstones and corals as well. It's a coastal floodplain in a well-forest environment. These habitats were actually quite a bit filled with some cool animals, such as Pygmophyseter, which is briefly described as Apatosaurus, Ornitholestes, Paraconodon, Dinosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Stegosaurus, Nodocephalosaurus, and other Pentaceratops and things like that. And it was a very rich habitat filled with small mammals, fish, turtles, things like that. Very, very interesting. And Titanosceratops actually helped support the hypothesis that late Cretaceous dinosaur faunas were highly endemic, with distant species from the southern Great Plains of New Mexico and the northern Great Plains of Montana and Canada. And despite extensive sampling of both these formations, Triceratopsinines are unknown there, and this implies that the Triceratopsinines may have evolved in the south and then spread north in the Maastrichtian to become Triceratops that we know and love today. But yeah, really, really cool species. I really love how it's actually come out. I like the spikes on the design. Really, really nice. Nice to see nice animal here. Do love Titanosceratops. Really, really cool. You've got that big skull there. Really impressive animal, if I do say so myself. So let these guys walk off and do their thing. Make sure they're off doing their thing. Next up, we're going into the future a little bit from here. We're going to South America, into the Pliocene. In Pliocene, we've got Josephsceratops, I believe you say that. It's a very long, weird name, but very, really cool animal. So let's release this guy. Look at these wonderful guys walking out. Let's have a look at you. Let's see if we can find this one. I like this one's pose. I like his moxie. So this is Josephsceratops, I believe you say that. These guys are an extinct genus of enormous diomid rodent. They lived during the early Pliocene and the early Pleistocene in Uruguay. The only living member is the Pecarania, which is a really interesting rodent, and they're quite big as well. They're comparable to the size of like porcupines and that kind of some of the larger rodents that we know. And it was first named after the Uruguayan national hero Jose Argus, I believe you say that. And it describes two species. There was J. magna that was described in 1966 with a left mandible, and J. mozini, which was described in 2008 with a partially complete skull. And both are found in the San Jose member of the Regala Formation in Uruguay, which is really awesome. So as I mentioned, first described in kind of the area, there's mandibles and molars described of this guy. And the genus name honors that hero Jose Anguirus, which names and Magnus are large. But in 2007, it had to be renamed to Josephsceratops because the previous name was actually a junior homonym of a genus of nematodes, which are a type of worm. So they basically, it was already taken and they had to rename it to Josephsceratops. So, and then 2008, this other species was found, which based on a massive and nearly complete skull, and it was huge. And as I mentioned, the Josephsceratops is part of the family Diomatidae, which is a group of rodents in South America. The only living member is Pecarania, I believe you say that, and it's a large rodent. They got up to about 15 kilograms, but it's the only one alive today. And if you look up these guys, Pecarania, they're very, very cute. And the age and taxonomy of these guys, or taphonomy, they were found basically, as I mentioned, around kind of the Upper Paleogene to the youngest in the Pleistocene. And the J. magna was found in situ, but they've never been reported in the Quaternary, so within the last kind of million years or so. But they are found in the Lower Pleistocene and the San Jose member as well, which is really, really cool. In terms of its size and molars, they have big, like most rodents, they have large incisors that grow continuously through the animal's life. And they also have, they also push back as far as the eye sockets. They've also got these grinding teeth that seem to be quite adapted for obviously grinding things as well. And these large incisors, which would be very good for both biting into food, but also, of course, defending themselves, since these large incisors would be able to deliver a pretty nasty bite to any predator. The skull of J. mozini, which is the larger one, is the only species which the skull has been identified, and it is massive. It measures about 53 centimeters, or about 1 foot 9 inches long. And for comparison, a sample of 110 beef cows of 9 breeds measured about 52. So it's about the size of a cow, and it's quite a bit larger than the previously identified largest rodent, Probonemes pattersoni. And it's quite a complete skull and looks really, really beautiful. And it seems to have a lot of really interesting things that can convert to chinchillas. and they have like a small arbitrary bulb and have like smaller ears, but they have long ear canals, and they would have been converged a lot more with chinchillas and things like that, which is quite interesting. And in terms of body mass, they were the first Diomida was nearly complete skull was discovered, and they tried to estimate a size. Early estimates put this animal between 468 to 2,568 kilograms, or between 1 to 5,000 pounds, with an average of a little over a ton. And to compare that, the largest living modern rodent, the capybara, is only about 60 kilograms, or 130 pounds. And Apatosaurus was also Phobonimus was about 400 to 700 kilograms, which makes it the largest rodent known. And even the most recent estimates in 2022 still put it as quite large. This is probably the most recent and most accurate estimates. They assumed the same head-to-body ratio of the Pacarana, and they produced a body length of about 262.8 centimeters, or about 8 feet long. And they calculated that weight between 254 and 576 kilograms, or 560 to 1,270 pounds for J. Monsoni, and about 108 to 200 kilograms, or 238 to 441 pounds for Patasoni, which is a different genus. But they suggest basically the most likely range would be around 480 to 500 kilograms for J. Monsoni. And then, though there could be potentially, any estimates on over about 600 kilograms are unwarranted, but definitely within that kind of 400, 500 range is definitely a good estimate for the size of these guys, which is really cool. And to look in these guys as well, they also estimated the bites of these guys. They have very, very powerful incisors and a reinforced skull. And it's believed to be used as to either use their incisors to either dig or open hard objects such as wood or nuts. And if it's the former, these guys could have been digging up roots and even digging large burrows to live in, with mega burrows having been discovered in South America, though we don't know if it belongs to Josephsceratops or any other animal that could be carving them. And these powerful incisors would be really great against predators, as we'll get into. And since they lived with terror birds and borohyenids, which are marsupial-like carnivores, they would have been able to defend themselves from a charging predator quite well and give a pretty bad bite. And these bites would have been pretty big. The estimates would have been bite forces comparable to something like a polar bear or a jaguar, so that gives you quite a good idea of the bite. Looking into its diet as well, preliminary results show that these guys were eating fruits and soft plants, mainly aquatic vegetation, and seem to have lived in a kind of estuarine environment. And this began to initially guess these guys could not grind up tough plants, but these guys could have been digging up roots, much like with their incisors, like how elephants use their tusks to do that as well. And carbon isotopes, looking at the enamel of these giant rodents, suggests that J. monsoni actually ate only C3 plants, which includes leaves and fruits, as opposed to C4 plants, which is actually quite similar to modern capybaras. So they preferred leaves and fruits, but would eat grass if they needed to, and especially in leaner times. And in terms of its paleoecology, it's a very interesting ecology. Josephsceratops has been identified from the San Jose member of the Ragon Formation and lived with animals such as toxodonts, peccaries, many types of ground sloths, glyptodonts, like Glyptodon itself, and the scimitar-toothed cat, Xenus smilus, and also terror birds, which is an identified species. So quite a rich habitat and a few predators for it. And the area would have been a forested environment as well. And this dates back to about the Pleistocene boundary. And at that same time, the Uruguayan environment, kind of climate changed from a dry semi-arid one to a sparse forest cover. And considered with the onset of the Quaternary glaciation, the climate was warmer and more humid, which kind of created that reforestation and may have led to their extinction. But really, really cool animals. They love Josephsceratops. It would be cool if they gave it another pass and just not make it a giant capybara. Maybe adds some interesting colors to make it a little bit more different. But yeah, I do really love this guy. Really, really cool animal. How can you not love him? Really, really cool. So let him walk off and do his thing. Really, really awesome. So next up, we have got by Hyper GST did Josephsceratops. We've got here by Jagged Fang Designs. We have got Apatosaurus. So here's everyone's favorite big bad Apatosaur. So this is a Jagged Fang Designs one, and it looks rather beautiful. I think it fits much better with the more accurate since there's been a recent study, I think about a couple of years ago, into how the sacral vertebrae or the vertebrae over the hip was placed and kind of created this little bit taller look to it, and I think it's come out rather nicely. But we can see some of the wonderful changes. It looks much more like the actual animal, what with that elephant skin texture, but you can see these big round scales it's got here. You can also see it's got this beak going on here, with a little bit of like a almost like a eyelashes going on, which is really really cool. And then you can see these. There is a hypothesis with the Bronto Smash. These osteoderms or kind of bony pads going along the vertebrae there. I don't think it's well supported, but it looks really nice on this guy and it's really, really cool. I like the pattern on it as well. It came out wonderfully. And then we can see it's also got the correct feet here. So we can see it's got that hoof shape to its feet and that long dew claw. Really, really awesome. And you can see the back feet as well are right. You can see it's got the three big claws and the fourth and fifth digit have none on them. You can also see that spike down the neck there, the spikes down there. And then this long whip-like tail that most diplodocids have. We might actually let it walk out a little bit to show it off. There we are. So we can see it goes all the way down to the back, though. We have some skin impressions from other diplodocids that suggest it may have had quite lots of spikes even going down the side and even the bottom of the tail, which makes it rather interesting. But yeah, this is pretty much what a realistic Apatosaurus would look like. Looks much nicer compared to, I believe, the Jurassic World ones, which is like grey and drab with elephant skin on it. But this is much more accurate to the realistic animal, and you can see the different variations in the skin. I think the patterns that were introduced in this game really done wonders for a lot of the dinosaurs. And yeah, really, really awesome. I'm definitely a big fan. So we'll let them walk off and do their thing. Next, we're moving on to some really cool animals here. Another Jagged Fang design animal here. We've got that replaces the Monolophosaurus. We have got Poposaurus, which is a really interesting animal. Let's see, we got perfect one over here. So let's have a look at you. This is a. We'll let them walk off and do their own thing a little bit. There we are. Here we are. So this is Poposaurus, a very interesting animal. So Poposaurus is not a dinosaur. It's named the Popo-Argy reptile. These are an extinct genus of Pseudotsuchian archosaur from the late Jurassic that comes from the southwestern United States and belong in its own clade of Poposauridae, which is a very interesting and unusual group of Pseudotsuchians from the Jurassic, which include sail-backed beaks and aquatic forms. So fossils of this guy have been found around Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, and Texas. And except the skull, most parts are known. And the type species Gracilis was described and named by Macrease Goldsmith Mahey in 1915, with a second species, which originally the type species of Lithosuchus, which is interesting, and has actually had quite a few classifications throughout history, including a dinosaur, a phytosaur, and a Rarasuchian, but none of them really stuck. And very interesting, like theropod dinosaurs, even though they're not a theropod dinosaur, they are a biped, so they would walk around on their back legs. However, as a Pseudotsuchian, they're actually more closely related to living crocodiles than they are to dinosaurs, and is thought to have actually evolved this form of locomotion independently, possibly from an early archosaur's ability to high walk, which is quite interesting. So Poposaurus is not the hugest animal, but still quite big. They got about 4 meters long, which is tail covering about half its body length, and is estimated to weigh between 60 to 75 kilograms, or 132 to 165 pounds, with the largest individuals getting up to 90 to 100 kilograms, or 200 to 20 pounds. And you can see that body is quite laterally compressed, so it's quite tall looking, and it has narrow hip. The pubis and ischium are elongated, and they actually form a distinct hook that is unique to Poposaurus and a few other early Lusuchians, which is quite interesting. And they have 5 sacral vertebrae on the hip and all that. And very interesting, these guys are kind of very weird. They're almost more like the hair they've kind of shown is a little bit more digigrade, but I believe most reconstructions put them almost as like plantigrade, which is really, really interesting. And the hind limbs were about twice as long as the arms and close together, which is quite interesting. And the first remains of Poposaurus were found in 1904 in Lander, Wyoming, by paleontologist J.H. Lees, which was a ischium and from the Popo-Agi Formation, where it gets its name Poposaurus. And it was described quite similar to the Phytosaur Paleorhynchus bassoni, but was obviously described as its own thing over time. But there's been more things found of it and been assigned to many groups of reptiles, originally considered in 1921 in Ornithischian. Then it was put in its own group, the Poposauridae, in the Archosaurs. It was considered a sauropod at one point, which is quite interesting. The most recent kind of things, the last known material for Poposaurus was again described in 2007, with 2 new specimens coming from the petrified forest in Arizona and the Tocovas Formation. And it suggests a nearly complete specimen was also found as well from Chile, and suggests that these guys were maybe even like a hypercarnivorous predator, since the complete skeleton suggests these guys were a big predator and really cool. And again, I mentioned they're a member of the Poposauridae, so their own kind of group, and part of the larger Suchosuchian group, Popodosauroidea, which includes a bunch of other Jurassic pseudosuchians like Pseudosaurochids and Suvosaurids, which were all bipedal, and they include animals such as Lotosaurus and the Suvosaurids as well. If you know Ephygia, which is a really interesting kind of animal as well, Ephygia arizonosaurus, which would look like Posterus with its sail, which is really interesting. Those kind of really, really weird Jurassic weirdos is basically what this guy was, or at least one of them. And in terms of locomotion, it was described in 1915 as an animal with kind of a very well-muscled creature, light in weight with a bipedal gait and quite swift in motion, which is quite cool. And kind of leads to people thinking, oh, it's a dinosaur, but most of its close relatives actually were obligate quadrupeds and could not walk on that. Then they found these guys, although Poposaurus and early dinosaurs were bipedal, and most likely evolved independently between the both of them because they evolved quite differently. And Poposaurus kind of inherited these rectilinear-driven movement from the early Archosaur ancestors, and the leg musculature shows that kind of were a little bit different in how they evolved, and more similar to that of crocodilians. So their muscles and stuff were much more arranged similar to crocodilians and to birds and later dinosaurs, which is interesting. And that just really shows a lot of very interesting things about them. And it actually shows that even though they were bipedal like dinosaurs, they were actually bipedal in a lot of very different ways, which I think really shows a lot about how even things look the same, they can evolve very differently and come kind of like they've got the same conclusion but different homework is kind of the best way to put it. And another thing as well is that these guys would have had similar distinct form of respiration, which most likely had intercostal muscles running through the ischium and back of the hip and the gastralia, and they would have cursorial breathing, which would have been very much like a mammal diaphragm, and they would have been able to pump in and out like modern crocodiles would, unlike a lot of the later dinosaurs that have those kind of air sacs, so things like sauropods and birds as well. But yeah, really, really interesting guys as well. Poposaurus is a very interesting animal. Yep, so we'll let them run off and do their thing. So many different colors has come out of these guys, so let them walk off and do their thing. So next up, now you got to move up right in front of my hatchery. Poposaurus is definitely a very interesting animal. Definitely a big fan. But next up, we've got another animal from the Jurassic. Both starting with a P, we've got Posterus, by definitely not Dilophosaurus. Let's see if we can get that other one kind of in a nice position to talk about him. There we are. So this is our wonderful guy here. You can see how different they look, even though they are bipedal from dinosaurs. But anyway, this is Posterus, which means crocodile from post. These guys are an extinct genus of Rauisuchiid crocodilians and contains 2 species, Posterus kirkpatricki and Allisoni, which have come from the late Jurassic of North America. These guys are in the class Pseudosuchia, which is a group of archosaurs that includes modern crocodilians, and the other main group is Metatasalia, which includes non-avian dinosaurs, their descendants. And its name refers to the Post Quarry, which was the place in Texas where many fossils were found, and is actually considered to be one of the apex predators of course, the late Jurassic. If you guys have seen Walking with Dinosaurs, you definitely know that. There we are. I want to see you in the light. There we are. I want to see you nice and pretty in the light, and you can have a look and talk about this guy. So, yeah. They were they were one of the largest carnivores known from the late Jurassic. Adults reached about 1.2 meters, or about 4 foot in height, and about 5 meters long from snout to tail tip. And mass would have ranged from 250 to 450 kilograms, or 550 to 990 pounds. And the length of the paratype itself is estimated to be about 4 meters, with the holotype being a little bit longer, at about even 6 meters. And very large individuals and specimens suggest to get potentially even up to 7 meters, which is pretty interesting. And you can see they've got quite a massively built skull, and they've got long dagger-like teeth, and the neck was also elongated with that long tail but short torso. And although remains of the skeleton also identify osteoderms, and there were thick plates forming scales along the back, neck, and possibly above and under the tail. So this is potentially a little bit smooth, but still really, really awesome. The neck of Posterus also had at least 8 cervical vertebrae. And they've also got the rib cage of very typical archosaur structure with gastralia at the bottom there that goes around the bottom. They're also called belly ribs. But you can see this got a very interesting skull there, quite a narrow skull. It's very, very reminiscent of a dinosaur, but quite different in looks. So there's many fenestrae as well, and they have these long kind of teeth there that would be used for biting into things and things like that. Especially like they've also been compared to like hook sabers almost, and which is quite interesting. A complete tooth from Posterus was found about 7 centimeters long, so quite big, and they are heterodonty, which means that each tooth is different size and shape from the others, which is quite interesting. And the upper jaw contains 17 teeth, with the premaxilla holding 4, and each maxilla 13 teeth, which is quite cool as well. And very similar to crocodilians, the activity different from crocodilians. The Posterus was different from that, as the replacement tooth didn't fit directly into the pulp cavity of the old tooth, but they were grew until they were reabsorption of the old tooth was complete. So it gives you a little bit different from these guys as well. Quite interesting. They've also got large orbits, which imply that they have large eyes for good for seeing as well. And they also have Jacobson's organ, which is olfactory sense that almost is referred to as a sixth sense as well, which is quite interesting. In terms of its limbs and posture, it has been a little bit of a controversy whether it was bipedal or quadrupedal. If you guys have seen Walking with Dinosaurs, it was often referred to as heavily built and quadrupedal. But most recent evidence, about basically around 2013 or so, it shows that these guys may have been obligate bipeds because of the digits of the anatomy, and the proportions were quite similar of that of many theropod dinosaurs. So that's why it's considered kind of a little bit more bipedal these days, but still looks really, really nice. And it's very different. You can see like the dinosaurs, let's see if we don't really have one here, but dinosaurs, they have very bird-like feet. These guys still bipedal, but they've got very crocodilian-like feet, which makes it very, very almost weird, but still kind of cool. I'm a big fan of these guys. In terms of history, it was discovered in 1980 in Texas, in the Post Quarry in Texas, with the holotype being a very well-preserved skull and some post-crania, and a paratype was also found, things like that. In 2008, there was a new species found on Allisonidae, which was found by Brian Coffey and Marco Brewer in 1992. And it was had like chevrons, things like that. And well-preserved remains shed new lights on the anatomy of Posterus and the differences between these guys. And it also proved to confirm the chimera theory. And the holotype was also kind of unusual as in its guts contents. And it shows what this kind of animal was eating, which includes cynodonts, Dictodonts, Tenospondylus, and a Sphenodontian, which is a little relative of the Tuatara, or what is a Tuatara, but and kind of a long extinct relative of the Tuatara, which is really interesting. So these guys were represent the largest sukin in the area and kind of were the top predator of the ecosystem, which is really, really cool. So they lived in a tropical environment. It was mostly warm and contained lots of ferns and things like that. And the environment it lived with had all sorts of different animals, like the fish Xenocanthus, Labyrinthodonts, and reptiles such as Tryponosaurus and Melirosaurus. Also lots of archosaurs such as Posterus, Leptosuchus. Dictodont was actually Placerius. Rutodon, Desmatosuchus, Trilophosaurus, and things like that. It was one of the largest animal in the ecosystem, and Triplothorax and Placerius and Trilophosaurus would have been prey for these guys, so they would be feeding on Dictodonts, other archosaurs. Very interesting ecosystem there, right at the end of the Jurassic period, which was a weird time in itself, and yeah, really, really cool. I do not love Postosuchus, and I think it's come out rather wonderfully. Definitely not Dilophosaurus. They definitely did do a good job with this one. I'm a big, big fan. So really, really cool. So next up, we've got something that's going to be a little bit irritating. We've got Irritator by LA Studios. Here's a wonderful guy here, and look how beautiful LA Studios has made this guy. So Irritator is a genus of Spinosaurus dinosaur that lived in what is now Brazil from the early Cretaceous, about the Aptian stage, which lived from 113 to 110 million years ago. It is known from a nearly complete skull that was found at the Romaldo Formation, and fossil dealers actually acquired the skull and sold it to the State Museum of Natural History in Stuttgart. And in 1996, the holotype was for the type species Irritator challengeri, which the genus name comes from the word irritation, which reflects the feeling of the paleontologist who found the skull had been heavily damaged and altered by collectors. And the species name is the homage to a fictional character, Professor Challenger, from the Arthur Conan Doyle novels, which is pretty interesting. Some paleontologists regard another species of Aragusta limma, which is a synonym of Irritator, because they both come from the same units. But that's some taxonomy things we could probably talk about another time. It's very complicated. Estimated to be about 6 to 8 meters long, quite a long animal. Irritator was about a ton, and actually one of these smaller Spinosaurids. And he had quite a slender snout there. And lengthwise across the head run to the sagittal crest there, and the powerful neck muscles that anchored there. And they also had the most Irritator challengerized holotype actually has the most completely preserved Spinosaur skull yet found. And the Amarga snout tip actually extends to the side with a rosette-like shape, which has actually a really interesting crest as well. And one possible specimen indicates that these guys may have had a crest, elongated first finger, and a sail running down its back like other Spinosaurids. So often they are mistaken. The Irritator was mistaken initially for a pterosaur, then a Maniraptoran, but then in 1996 it was identified as a Spinosaurid. And these guys are both Irritator and Arogama was both belong to the Spinosaurines family of Spinosaurs, and they would have a generous diet feeding on fish, small animals, and potentially have quite subaquatic habits. And there's fossil evidence to show that they ate a pterosaur, so they would have been living in these coastal lagoons and even surrounded by these dry regions, and would have been feeding on turtles and smaller animals and things like that on that seafood diet, because if they seafood, they're definitely going to eat it, which I think is the best way to put it. And the holotype was found in northern Brazil, as I mentioned, and was quite an irritating thing to get out, as mentioned by the name. And as I mentioned, even the maximal size estimates, they only got about 7 or even 8 meters is probably the longest estimates. Most recent estimates put it about kind of 6 to 7 meters or even 8 meters if you're generous. Yeah, really, really interesting animals. Because of its taxonomy and because of there's so many genera named to it as well and things like that, it's got a very complicated taxonomic history. But it seems to be more closely related to things like Suchomimus and Spinosaurus and things like that, kind of its own little kind of group, which is interesting. Related to those guys, and in terms of paleobiology, these guys would have been mostly piscivorous or partly piscivorous, so maybe eating things such as fish. But we do have evidence of them eating pterosaurs, as I mentioned, so very likely would have been on that seafood diet, eating anything small, pterosaurs, fish, and they have that long crocodilian-like snout, which is adapted for feeding on slippery prey, which includes fish. And there's been parts found in, like, in baryonyx. There's been iguanodon bones found in the stomach of a baryonyx. So it very shows that even though they did very much like fish, they probably didn't worry too much about what they were eating. In terms of their aquatic habitats, these guys, it's been suggested through many spinosaurids that these, like, isotope analysis and bone histology, these guys would have been living in these marine ecosystems or semi-aquatic habitats around rivers and lakes and coasts, and feeding on fish there, which is quite interesting. And even some studies as well into Irritator. There's actually been some look into, like, the semicircular canals in the air. Suggests that these guys would coordinate fast head movements and downward inclined snout posture. So that would be good for looking into prey, almost like a heron in that regard, which is quite interesting. And it also shows that these guys had pretty good hearing. These guys would have had rough estimates of hearing in the range similar to like 350 to 3,550 hertz, which makes Irritator placed under bird hearing but above crocodile hearing, so in the kind of that sweet middle. In terms of this paleo environment and paleogeography, Irritator is found from the Romaldo Formation about the early Cretaceous period, about 110 million years ago. And during this time, the southern Atlantic Ocean was opening and creating all sorts of basins and things, which created some great habitats for these guys to live in. The environment was dominated by lots of pterosaurs like Apanguara, Marodactylus, Tropicnathus, Thalassodromaeus, which is with ones that we've covered here before. Also Santanaraptor, which is a really interesting dinosaur, and also Megaraptorans and Dromaeosaurs have been found in there. Lots of crocodiles and many different species of fish and other small invertebrates, things like that, have been found. A very rich ecosystem. And there's actually many different species of piscivorous animals, which suggests that there would have been quite a bit of niche partitioning going on. And there's been lots of comparisons between the Ronaldo and Kato formations to Middle Cretaceous Africa that suggest that these basins were connected to the Tethys Sea, but mostly sporadic. And Spinosaurus actually achieved a cosmopolitan distribution between that early Cretaceous. And Sereno and colleagues in 1998 suggested that the opening with the Tethys Sea, Spinosaurus would have evolved in the south, so in Gondwana, and Baryonychines, so things like Baryonyx and its relatives, would have evolved in Europe and kind of spread out from there, and then they kind of mixed up, do their own things in there. Potentially would have done a little bit of swimming. Some people suggest that the genus Oxlania may be the same as Spinosaurus, which is quite interesting considering the semi-aquatic habits of that guy. But yeah, very, very cool animal. How can you not love Irritator? Not very irritating to look at least. It's a very beautiful animal, and LA Studios really did a great job representing this guy. So we're going to let him run off and do his thing. So last but most certainly not least, we've got another cool animal here. This one is done by Sweetener. We have got Sorofagan X. So here we are, Sorofagan X. So Sorofagan X, which means the Lord of Lizard Eaters, is a genus of large allosaurid dinosaur from the Morrison Formation, found in the late Jurassic, about the Cambrian stage about 151 million years ago, and found in the United States in Oklahoma. Though a lot of paleontologists consider it to be a junior synonym of Allosaurus, either an adult specimen or just another species. Sorofagan X represents a very large Morrison allosaurid with some very interesting kind of features to it. It is actually the largest terrestrial carnivore in North America during the late Jurassic as well, measuring about 10 meters or about 34 feet long and about 2 to 3, even 4 tons in body mass. It was first discovered in 1931 and 1932. They uncovered the bones of this large theropod in Oklahoma, and it was given the name Sorofagan X maximus by Stovall in an article, which means lizard eat, or also kind of king of the lizard eaters, or the largest lizard eater, which makes it really, really fun. And it was originally named Saurophagus, but turns out the Saurophagus was actually taken by the tyrant flycatcher, which was a type of bird, I believe. The tyrant flycatcher, I believe they're a bird. Yeah, they are a bird. So that genus was taken, and they named the new genus Sorofagan X, which means the ruler of the lizard eaters, which is quite interesting. and is also the state fossil of Oklahoma, and a large skeleton of Sorofagan X can be seen in the San Noble, Oklahoma Museum of Natural History. And although the best known Sorofagan X material has been found in Oklahoma, some potential material has been found in northern New Mexico. And there's been a lot of debate, as I mentioned, with its relation to Allosaurus. Some believe it could be its own genus. Some believe it's a species of Allosaurus. A lot believe that it's actually just an adult Allosaurus, because we haven't found an adult like Allosaurus fragilis, which is quite interesting. That's kind of the most likely hypothesis, in my opinion. But of course, many different people have many different opinions. In terms of, as I mentioned, its ecology and stuff like that, it's the largest carnivore found in the Morrison, bigger than Allosaurus and Torvosaurus, reaching about 10.5 meters long and about 3 to 4 metric tons. And the fossils known from Sorofagan X come from the Bushy Basin member, which is the latest part of the Morrison, that suggests that this genus was either uncommon or really only first appeared later into the Jurassic. And because of the rarity of its remains, we really don't know too much about it. But the Morrison Formation is kind of a very interesting formation that's about 156 million years ago at the base and at 446 at the top. So it goes through most of the stages of the late Jurassic. It was a semi-arid environment with distinct wet and dry seasons, and with lots of swamps and rivers and floodplains and things like that. And it's a very interesting environment because it has so many gigantic sauropods that we all know and love, such as Barosaurus, Brontosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Camarasaurus, Diplodocus. Also animals such as Stegosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Marshiosaurus, Allosaurus, Ornitholestes. Those are the famous dinosaurs we know about, but there's also some really cool small animals such as turtles, lizards, frogs, sphenodonts, crocodilians, pterosaurs, and lots of mammals as well. And also the flora is quite interesting as well. We get lots of algae and ginkgos and conifers and things like that. In Oklahoma, there's actually been quite a few Apatosaurus specimens found in Oklahoma, which suggests that it may actually be a possible prey item for Sorofagan X. And there have been bite marks from both on Allosaurus on Myropelta, which is a small type of ankylosaur, have been found along with feeding traces in the Upper Jurassic. And their lift striations, which are greater than any known specimen of Allosaurus or Ceratosaurus. And the extrapolation suggests that this may have been an unusually large specimen of Allosaurus, or a separately large taxon such as Torvosaurus or Sorofagan X, both of which are not known from the quarry. And this suggests that there's also some evidence of cannibalism in Allosaurus as well. And based on the position and nutrient value associated with variant skeletal elements with bite marks, it's actually predicted that while Myropelta was either preyed upon or scavenged on, shortly after death, Allosaurus scavenged sometime after death, which is quite interesting. Gives us a little bit about its, a little bit of a story, seeing like this Allosaurus or Sorofagan X or Torvosaurus walking across and finding this Myropelta kind of specimen and just scavenging on it. But yeah, Sorofagan X, very interesting dinosaur. Most likely just an adult Allosaurus fragilis or just the species of Allosaurus. But obviously with the paleontology, there's always arguments and things like that. But we'll find out eventually, hopefully. But yeah, really, really cool animal to have in game if you guys want something a little bit different from your normal Allosaurus. But yeah, really, really awesome. So done by Sweetener, who always does a wonderful job. But yeah, thanks to everyone for making these wonderful mods, and I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys like and subscribe. Hope you guys click the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.